will often cite nuclear waste as the big problem. What are you going to do with all the nuclear waste? Decontamination. Now, this is an economic and a political problem, but let's talk about the scientific problem. We've seen this graph before. This shows the decay and radioactivity of waste from a conventional uranium-powered plant. And you can see that the radiation drops quite a lot within the first few years, but it's still more radioactive than natural uranium until about maybe 2,000 years or something like that. Is it really that dangerous? I mean, people talk about plutonium being the most dangerous substance in the world. That's just not true. There are many biological toxins that are much more dangerous per kilogram than plutonium. And we've seen plutonium, as long as it's outside your body, is not dangerous at all because the alpha radiation cannot penetrate your skin. And nuclear waste does stop being radioactive eventually, whereas pollution, for example, from heavy metals lasts forever. This was brought home to me earlier this year when I went to the Urunga wetlands in northern New South Wales. This is a beautiful area. There was an old antimony mine. Antimony is a metal, and it used to be mined here, and it's now being returned as a beautiful wetland environment. With the antimony in a huge underground repository, and they had signs proudly saying this antimony is carefully sealed away and is guaranteed to stay sealed away from the environment for at least 100 years. The trouble is that antimony will still be toxic all the way into the future. It'll still be toxic 1,000 years, 10,000 years, 1,000,000 years, 100,000,000 years, 1,000,000,000 years from now. So in that sense, antimony pollution, or many other heavy metals, are much worse than radioactive pollution. They are deadly forever, as opposed to radioactive things, which eventually will decay into something stable. So there seems to be a bit of a double standard here. Radioactive waste, unbelievably dangerous, can't be put anywhere safely, but there are plenty of other forms of extremely toxic waste, particularly heavy metal waste, that are all over the place. Now, one worry many people have is dirty bombs. The idea is that terrorists steal radioactive material, either radioactive waste or something from a reactor, and then spread it across a city. The city becomes uninhabitable, has to be abandoned. You could imagine New York or Beijing being evacuated because of radioactive material spread across it. But this is actually very problematic. So let's imagine you wanted to spread enough radioactive material to make 1 square kilometre of a city so dangerous that people will get a lethal dose in an hour, so they'll have to abandon it. But how would you transport that stuff? I mean, 1 square kilometre is 1,000,000 square metres. So if you put all the material that's going to cover 1,000,000 square metres into, say, 1 cubic metre, that bomb would be 1,000,000 times more radioactive, and that means anyone picking up the bomb to put it in a truck would die within milliseconds, get a lethal dose. Anyone within 10 meters in far less than a second. Even if you somehow manage to get this radioactive material and put it in a van with thick-legged shielding, the driver's going to get a lethal dose within 3 seconds. So it's just really difficult. You need a lot of radioactive material, and it's going to be really difficult to handle without killing yourself and get it. And then you've got to spread it out over a whole city in such a way that it can't just be washed away immediately. So in fact, it's believed that terrorists like Al-Qaeda considered this and decided it just wasn't practical and decided to go with other approaches to terrorism instead. The worry is probably a psychological one. Maybe you could spread something that's far less radioactive. So in fact, the chance of people dying is very, very low, but just rely on people's freak-out terror of all things radioactive. I mean, you could spread something that gives like a 1 or 2 millisieverts over a city, and the cancer risk is going to be tiny, but that might still freak people out so they stop going to the city. So this is possibly how it'll work, not by actually killing people, but by relying on people's freak-out terror of all things radioactive and nuclear. The real risk, to my mind, is nuclear proliferation. So this is from reactors that use plutonium, and the risk is this can be turned into an atomic bomb. Turning uranium into an atomic bomb is very difficult because you need to enrich it, which is a very difficult process. But plutonium is much easier. You can separate it out chemically and just put it in a big enough chunk. It's difficult to get a big bomb, but some sort of small bomb, it's a difficult and big ask for terrorists, even if they got the plutonium. But at least for rogue governments, it's probably relatively straightforward. And this is a real risk, and it's possibly a reason for not having reactors that use or produce plutonium, and keeping the waste processed plutonium very dispersed so it can't easily be turned into nuclear weapons by state actors.